Welcome into the Behind the Basket podcast today, episode 1. I am your host, Ryan Massa. Before we do get into this podcast, I want to give a little background about me. For the majority of you, I'm assuming you are probably watching it on YouTube right now. Eventually, I do hope to transition to pretty much strictly Spotify and Apple Music. But again, the majority of you know me from YouTube. Being a YouTuber, we're trying out a podcast today. Hopefully, this one goes better than my last attempt. My last attempt did not go too well. Behind the Basket episode 1 today. So I just want to give you guys some background on kind of where I plan on taking this podcast. So basically, I kind of plan on talking about all things NBA. Whatever you guys really eventually want me to. Today, for the first episode, we're going to be talking about potential NBA playoff matchups. It sucks, but to be honest, if we are going to somehow get the NBA playoffs to, happen this year, it's probably going to be based off the current standings of the league today. I doubt if they're going to be able to get any games in, they're going to go ahead and finish the regular season. I would assume they'll probably just hop right into the playoff matchup. So as we have it today, we do have the 16 teams, 8 matchups. The 8 matchups here in the first round of the Eastern Conference and Western Conference NBA playoffs. As I mentioned previously, I did go off standings, so we take a look at some matchups today. We got the 1-seeded Milwaukee Bucks against the 8-seeded Orlando Magic, the 2-seeded Toronto Raptors, and the 7-seeded Brooklyn Nets. 3-seeded Boston Celtics and the 6-seeded Philadelphia 76ers, the number 4-seed Miami Heat, and the Indiana Pacers sitting there at the 5-seed. We take a look over to the Western Conference now. We got the 1-seeded LA Lakers against the 8-seeded Memphis Grizzlies, the 2-seeded LA Clippers against the 7-seeded Dallas Mavericks, the Denver Nuggets coming into the 3-seed. They'll be taking on the 6-seeded Houston Rockets, and finally the 4-seeded Utah Jazz against the Oklahoma City Thunder, who do sit at the 5-seed. So again, as I mentioned, I'm sure the majority of you are watching on YouTube. I'll make sure to have the link to hopefully Spotify. I don't think this first episode is going to be out on Apple Music quite yet. But again, if you guys could listen on Spotify, that would kind of be my preferred destination for you guys to get on there. Maybe leave me a review. Something like that would be great. So we're going to start out episode 1 here, just basically going over all 8 of these first round matchups. In the next video, I will be going over the next round. So the Eastern and Western Conference semifinals. There will obviously only be 4 matchups in that one. So when we look originally at what these standings would be, I think a couple teams here got kind of screwed over. One of them being the Philadelphia 76ers. I think them being a 6 seed is not, I think they should definitely probably end up ahead of the Indiana Pacers. That would be my, prediction going ahead there, and possibly even ahead of the Miami Heat. So they kind of got screwed as a 6 seed. And then if we take a look at the Western Conference, I think, again, the Rockets could be much higher than the 6 seed. I think they're a better team than the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think they're a better team than the Utah Jazz as well. So those are just 2 kind of my teams that got, a little bit scrubbed by this situation. If we were even lucky enough to get NBA basketball back this year, who knows? At this rate, it's really not looking too bright, but you never know. Again, with that, I hope you're all staying healthy from this terrible coronavirus that is going on right now. It's kind of, put a blip in all of our lives, or all of our daily lives as we know it. So a little bit more about this podcast before we do get into this. As I mentioned, all things NBA. Where I kind of want to take this is we're going to do a lot of NBA talk, a lot of NBA rumors when trades happen and stuff like that. Pretty much anything that's rumored has happened, or any, breaking news in the NBA pretty much. All things NBA is kind of what we're doing on the podcast. We might do a couple rankings at some point, whatever the case may be. So along with that, a lot of you guys have also asked me on YouTube, where I originally announced that I was bringing in Behind the Basket, that you wanted to have me talk about, some personal things, some things not NBA, just some things that you're interested in me about. So at the end of every episode, I'm going to go over a couple questions, basically 2 about the NBA that are not, to do with the podcast, that have not to do with the topic of the podcast, and then 2 just general questions that can be about me, about my personal life, whatever it may be. Obviously not getting too personal, but yeah, for that's how we're going to do that. I think it's a great way to end every video, and I'm honestly really excited. So hopefully you guys are excited here for it, Behind the Basket, and without further ado, let's just hop into it. So I kind of just went by the top seed for East Conference for how, we looked at the playoff matchups. I'm not going to get too in-depth. I mean, there are 8 matchups here. I think if we went really in-depth about every single one, it'll honestly take forever. So we're not going to go too in-depth literally at all today in this matchup. I don't really want this podcast to be more than 30 minutes long. So eventually, once we get to the next one, Eastern and Western Conference semifinals, we get a little more in-depth. Eastern and Western Conference finals, we'll get even more in-depth. And then finally, once I get to my prediction of the NBA finals, full in-depth, basically breaking down what I think the reason is for who I decide on the winner and everything like that. So Without further ado, we introduce the first matchup here, starting out with the Eastern Conference. I take a look at the 1-seeded Milwaukee Bucks against the 8-seeded Orlando Magic. Basically, for all these, I picked out a key player from each team, kind of gave my thought a little bit, and then ended up deciding who I think is going to win and in how many games. So, kind of goes without saying, I didn't really want to pick out, the best player from each team for these key players, but it kind of ended up being that way, and that's kind of obvious. I mean, when you get to playoff basketball, you kind of look at the best player, kind of has to shine, kind of has to be your star, and that's, how it typically is and how it's always been in the NBA. So, first key player here from the Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo, currently averaging 30 points a game, 13.7 rebounds, and 6 assists per game. I mean, what can you say? He's my MVP right now. The dude is an absolute stud. If the Bucks want any playoff luck, he obviously has to play well, which I don't really think is going to be too much of an issue for them, if we're being totally honest. I mean, Giannis Antetokounmpo, top 3 player at worst in the NBA. I mean, he's a total stud, franchise player. I think he clearly is going to be the MVP this year in real life. I know there's some talk between him and LeBron. Giannis is my pick. I mean, you take a look at that Bucks team without Giannis Antetokounmpo, I don't think they're probably not even a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. If you take a look at the Lakers with Anthony Davis, Kyle Kuzma, Dwight Howard, guys like that, you could maybe see them sneaking into the playoffs. Probably not still. I mean, Anthony Davis did lead a Pelicans team into the playoffs for a couple of years when he was in New Orleans. I honestly still think, though, the most valuable player should go to the team who he's most valuable to. And I know that kind of sounds funny, and you're like, obviously, it says that in the name. But when I take a look at a guy like Anthony Davis, I think he's a stud player, but I think he can get a lot more done than number 2 player on the Milwaukee Bucks, that being Chris Middleton, I would assume. I think that's kind of everybody's pick there. So, Giannis is my MVP. Again, getting back to the playoff matchup here, though, if we take a look at the Orlando Magic, an interesting team. It's a mix of a young team and a bunch of veteran guys that, like Evan Fournier, Nikola Vucevic, guys like that who do have some playoff experiences, really haven't, ever done much in the playoffs. I take a look at the Orlando Magic kind of just as a team in mediocrity, kind of not having a real franchise, direction right now. I mean, you take a look at their first-round pick, I believe it was in 2018, Mo Bamba, number 6 overall, if I am correct. They drafted him, I think, with the idea and hope that he was going to go in and replace Nikola Vucevic as their center of the future. And then the Magic go out and sign Nikola Vucevic to a huge $25 million a year, 4-year contract extension, which I didn't really understand. That for me is basically saying they don't have enough faith in a guy like Mo Bamba that he can eventually be the franchise center for that team, which is understandable, but why are you letting them ride the bench then? You can probably get some decent value from a team maybe like the Golden State Warriors, who are seriously looking for a starting center and potentially would offer you something really solid for that. I don't think they're going to get their first-round pick this year, but you can still get something like that. So without further ado, Nikola Vucevic is going to be my second key player of this first-round matchup. Currently averaging 19.5 points per game, 11 rebounds, 3.7 assists. And my thing is he's got to play well. If the Orlando Magic want any potential shot, which I don't think they have, of, maybe upsetting the Bucks in the first round, again, don't really think there's much chance of that one. Nikola Vucevic has to play like an absolute all-star and an absolute stud. I mean, will that happen? You really don't know. You hope it does, but you look at a guy like, a second option on the team, maybe like an Evan Fournier, maybe an Aaron Gordon. Markelle Fultz has really improved a little bit, which I do like seeing out of the former number 1 overall pick. But I just don't think they have enough to, really even make it a competitive series with the Milwaukee Bucks. Not really going to spend any more much time on this one. I think this series is over in 5 games. I think the Bucks obviously do take this one home. I think the Orlando Magic do win one at home. However, moving on to the next matchup, we got the 2-seeded Toronto Raptors against the 7-seeded Brooklyn Nets. My key players to this game going to be for the Toronto Raptors, Pascal Siakam, who has kind of turned into like the franchise star ever. After the Raptors won the finals last year, and you take a look at a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who did depart for the LA Clippers, was obviously such a big key piece to that championship run. Your finals MVP, absolute stud, probably the best 2-way player in the NBA. I still give him a little bit of a nod over Giannis, Anthony Davis, Paul George, Jimmy Butler, guys like that. I think Kawhi Leonard is the best 2-way player in the NBA. Unfortunately, you don't have many more. And to be totally honest, the Raptors have surprised me. I had them originally seeded, I think, as a 6 or a 7 seed when I made my preseason predictions. And boy, could I not have been more wrong about that. I took the loss of Kawhi, or not the loss, but the departure of Kawhi as something, he was their guy. I mean, he was their franchise player, not franchise player, but he was like their superstar player on their team. Obviously had a ton of experience. The other guys, Kyle Lowry is a really solid starting point guard in today's league. I don't really know if he's going to be leading a team. Pascal Siakam has kind of taken over that role. Superstar power forward in today's NBA. Currently averaging 23.5 points, 7.5 boards, 3.5 assists. I mean, he's just kind of seemingly come out of nowhere and turned into a guy that a team can build a franchise around. And good for them, honestly. I mean, Pascal Siakam, huge hit in the draft. I forget where he was drafted exactly. I'm not going to take the time and look it up right now or pretend, I have it off the top of my head. But Pascal Siakam, for me, if the Toronto Raptors really want to solidify themselves as a top team in the Eastern Conference, which they have done, Pascal Siakam needs to be absolutely unbelievable in these playoffs. Again, if they happen. We take a look over at the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously, two unbelievable free agent signings last offseason in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Unfortunately, neither of them are going to be playing. Kevin Durant has been out the entire year for the Brooklyn Nets, and I believe Kyrie Irving's been out since February 20th. So a guy for me that's going to be a key player for this team in this series is Spencer Dinwiddie. Now, 20 points per game, 7 assists, 3.5 rebounds, kind of taken over most of the ball handling duties since Kyrie has been out. I think Kyrie only started like 10 or 11 games, to be totally honest. So Spencer Dinwiddie kind of has been the guy for them all year. But I think Dinwiddie, in a lot of aspects, is going to be kind of the make or break, for this Nets team if they do want to end up doing well. I mean, you got a couple veterans like a DeAndre Jordan on that team who definitely has playoff experience with the Los Angeles Clippers. I just don't know if a DeAndre Jordan's really going to help you compete. So we take a look at my prediction for how this one's going to go. I think it is going to be a little bit of a back and forth series. And I think the Raptors do ultimately end up winning in 6, moving them on to the second round. Now, coming up here is my toughest one. We had the Boston Celtics, who are a 3 seed, against the 6-seeded Philadelphia 76ers. Now, as I mentioned previously, I don't really think the 76ers are a 6 seed. I think they're actually a lot better than that. If we hop into some key players of this series, Jason Tatum, who has had an unbelievable third year here for the Boston Celtics, averaging 23.5 points, 7 rebounds per game, and 2.9 assists per game. Originally the Celtics signed Kemba Walker to a 4-year max contract last offseason. They signed him thinking he was going to be the number 1 option. Jason Tatum has fully taken over that as the number 1 option, franchise guy for them. And then a guy like Jaylen Brown, who is an unbelievable number 2 option. Kemba's kind of taken like the back row. I mean, he's not in the driver's seat. He's not in the passenger seat. I would say he's probably, in the middle hump in the back of a car. And I don't mind that at all. I don't mind paying him a max contract because he still has unbelievable production. Still a really solid starting point guard in this league. Probably a top 6, 7, 8 guy in my opinion. But he, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown all have to play really well for the Celtics in this series. And then we take a look at the Philadelphia 76ers side. I mean, it's got to be Joel Embiid. You look at Joel Embiid and you look at the team he's facing here in the Boston Celtics. Do not have an absolute superstar starting center. Really nobody that can even compete defensively with Joel Embiid. If the 76ers, want to win this series, they need a guy like Joel Embiid to just absolutely feast. Currently averaging 23.5 points, almost 12 boards per game at 11.8, and 3 assists per game. He's just got to feast. He's got to put up 25 plus a game. He's got to grab double-digit rebounds no matter what. Probably close to 5 assists, I would imagine, because a lot of the attention will probably be focused on him as they really don't have anybody who can, cover him. So a lot of double teams, I would imagine. But that's my pick. I think it's going to be a super tough and gritty series for both sides. I think ultimately, though, home court advantage, will give the Celtics a little bit of an edge, and I do have them winning in 7 games. And probably one of the, I would say, second most interesting series here in the final of in the Eastern Conference. You take a look at the 4-seed Miami Heat matched up against the 5-seed Indiana Pacers. In this matchup, for me, it was a weird one. I mean, I really haven't watched many Pacers games this year, and to be honest, I haven't watched many Heat games this year. I know the Heat have obviously had the emergence of guys like Kendrick Nunn, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, just guys like that who kind of emerged out of nowhere and kind of helped them to become what they are today. Obviously, Jimmy Butler, a new addition to the Miami Heat this past offseason. Currently averaging 20 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, 6 assists per game, is my key player here for the Miami Heat. I think he needs to be what he is in today's NBA, one of the best two-way players. Really, I didn't love his fit in Philadelphia. I feel like Philadelphia's core was kind of all set with Embiid and Simmons. I didn't love his fit as a veteran guy on a pretty young team there. Didn't love him in Minnesota as either. I think Miami is a great spot for him. He's kind of the franchise player there. They just made a huge trade deadline acquisition of Andre Iguodala, who's one of the better defenders in the league, has some serious playoff experience with a decent amount of championships with the Golden State Warriors, to say the least. So still, nonetheless, Jimmy Butler is my player to watch here for the Miami Heat. And we take a look at the Indiana Pacers here. This might end up surprising you here, but I went with Domantas Sabonis, who currently is averaging 18.5 points per game, 12.5 rebounds, and 5 assists. They need him to be unbelievable. They need him to be an absolute stud. In my opinion, I think Bam Adebayo is going to be more so covering Miles Turner, which kind of leaves, Domantas Sabonis not open, but like who's covering him? Maybe Andre Iguodala. Not a bad thing, but you got a little bit of a size mismatch there. Domantas Sabonis, I believe, sitting at 6'11", 6'10", 6'11-ish. He's got to be absolute feast. If the Indiana Pacers want to do well, I would assume Jimmy Butler is probably going to be covering Malcolm Brogdon. Victor Oladipo should be healthy, hopefully. Could switch on to him a little bit. I'm assuming Bam Adebayo is probably covering Miles Turner. I think Domantas Sabonis seriously needs to, have an absolute field day in this series. And if they honestly have any chance of winning, I think this is the guy that, needs to go off, needs to prove he's a franchise star, a guy that you can build your team around. So that's my prediction. Ultimately, though, I think Miami does get in some trouble with Indiana. I think this series goes to 6 games, but I think eventually the Heat do end up pulling that off. So, surprise, surprise, the top 4 seeds all win here in the Eastern Conference. Not really too challenging of one to predict. But now we move on to the Western Conference. So coming into my first matchup here, we do have the Los Angeles Lakers sitting at a 1 seed, taking on the 8-seeded Memphis Grizzlies. I kind of went back and forth here, with who I wanted the key player to be for the Los Angeles Lakers. Obviously, it's between 2 of LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Ended up going with LeBron for a couple reasons. I think ultimately, no matter what, if you want to win a series, then you have LeBron James on your team. He needs to play like the best player in the league. That just kind of, all the attention is on him. Basically 24/7 in a game. There's never really a dull moment where you can just, sleep and let LeBron do whatever he wants. I think if he goes out and plays like LeBron James, top 3-4 player in the NBA at this time, second best player in the NBA history. Not going to get into that right now. He needs to be unbelievable. Currently averaging 25.7 points, 7.9 rebounds, and a career-high 10.6 assists per game. So he's been an unbelievable ball facilitator this year. Same with his whole career. I think he just needs to absolutely feast against whoever the hell the Memphis Grizzlies are going to put up guarding him, which I honestly have no idea. Legitimately cannot think of a single player on the Memphis Grizzlies. Maybe if you kept Andre Iguodala, he would have been the guy to cover LeBron, but not really sure. Maybe you go out there and you put Justice Winslow on him. I just don't really know how that one would turn out, to be totally honest with you. So he is my key player here for the Los Angeles Lakers. We take a look over in the Memphis Grizzlies side. It's going to be Ja Morant for me. My pick for Rookie of the Year, 17.5 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, and almost 7 assists at 6.9. Nice, I know. He just needs to be so good. He needs to, there's pretty much, I would say, under, probably a 3% chance that the Grizzlies have of winning this series right now. If they even want a shot in the dark, Ja Morant needs to play way above being a rookie. He needs to do some Derrick Rose type shit and go absolutely banana land and go out there and play like the absolute stud he's going to eventually. He already is a stud, but eventually I think he's going to be an MVP candidate. So I did end up going with, saying the Lakers are going to win this 1-4. I don't think it's going to be a tough, difficult, first-round matchup at all. It's a pretty young team in the Memphis Grizzlies. You got guys like Jonas Valanciunas, veteran player. Justice Winslow, been in the league for a few years. I just don't think they're going to really be able to compete at all. LA has way too many veterans on that team. They're honestly way too solid of a squad that there's even any hope for the Grizzlies to really win that one. We do move on to the second matchup here in the Western Conference Finals, which is a little bit more interesting than I originally thought it was going to be. You take a look here at the 2-seeded LA Clippers going up against the 7-seeded Dallas Mavericks. My key players for this series are Kawhi Leonard here for the Los Angeles Clippers, averaging currently 26.9 points, 7.3 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. Kawhi, straight off a Finals MVP last year for the Toronto Raptors, decided to go out west, join the Los Angeles Clippers, team up with Paul George, I think with one thing in mind, and that is winning multiple championships with this team. If he seriously wanted to stay and just win one championship, I'm pretty sure he probably could have got another one done if he stayed on the Toronto Raptors. That team with Kyle Lowry, Kawhi, Pascal Siakam, nobody in the Eastern Conference is beating that. Maybe the Bucks. I still don't think it happens, though. Look what happened last year, and it would have been basically the same team. So Kawhi has got to be the guy here. He's got to be what he is, in my opinion, the best two-way player in the league. Paul George needs to come out of whatever the hell slump he's been in this year and just need to be an absolute stud. He cannot be asleep for this whole series, because this Dallas Mavericks team, man, let me tell you, they are one underrated team. Because we take a look at the key player for the Dallas Mavericks here, going to be Luka Doncic. Again, not very hard. Currently averaging 28.7 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 8.5 assists per game as well. What can you say about him? He's a franchise player. In my opinion, I did not think he was going to be this good in the league ever. He has taken me, and I'm sure a lot of NBA fans, by surprise. He's broken out in his second season here. And, what can you say? I mean, he's a borderline MVP candidate. He's almost averaging a triple-double. He's 1.5 rebounds and 1.3 assists off averaging a triple-double here in his sophomore season. I mean, seriously, what can you say about that? Like, there's not many guys in this league that can do that. So if they want to, you know, maybe have a chance them being the Dallas Mavericks, I think Luka Doncic has to play well. I mean, that's an obvious one. But I think Kristaps Porzingis really has to get back to what he was in New York, which is funny to say because he spent his first couple of years in New York. And now we're saying he has to get back to that. You know, typically you want to go in the reverse direction. You know, you want to get better from your rookie and sophomore season, you know, to go on an upward path. But that is what it is. I think that, again, this is a great playoff experience for Luka and Kristaps Porzingis, but I think Kawhi and Paul George are just ultimately going to be too much to handle, way too much experience on the side of Kawhi and PG. I think the Clippers do end up winning in 6, though. I think, to be totally honest, I do think the Dallas Mavericks do get 2 wins. I think they get 1 in LA, and I think they get 1 in Dallas as well. I actually do have them going up 2-1. I think the Clippers win the first game at home, the Dallas Mavericks win 2 and 3, and then the Clippers go ahead and, you know, win 3 straight there. But that is my prediction for the second matchup here in the Western Conference. These next 2 matchups are probably the hardest 2 that I had to predict here. Some people are probably going to be mad at me for these predictions, but this is my honest opinion here. We take a look here at the 3-seeded Denver Nuggets going up against the 6-seeded Houston Rockets. My key players for this one are going to be Nikola Jokic, 20 points per game, 10 rebounds, almost 7 assists at 6.9. Nice, I guess. Nikola Jokic basically has to be the guy. He has to be what he is and probably the second best player in the series behind James Harden. You know, when I look at Nikola Jokic, I see a franchise player. I don't know if I see a guy that's ever going to be a franchise player to win a championship. That's my opinion. I think if he ends up, you know, he doesn't remind me of Anthony Davis in the sense that he could just never, you know, maybe win a championship by himself. I mean, I think there were a lot more issues for Anthony Davis, you know, in New Orleans than him being just the primary guy. I think that front office did a really bad job at, you know, building that team. They got gifted with the number 1 pick back in 2012, I believe, 2012 or 2013. I think it was 2012. Was it 12 or 13? I think it was 12. And obviously took Anthony Davis, who was the clear-cut best prospect. I mean, you didn't really have to think about that one. But when I take a look at a guy like Nikola Jokic, if he wants any chance of getting a championship in his career, I think he's just got to, you know, break out and put up stats like he is averaging this year. He needs to play like a superstar, which he does, don't get me wrong. I just also look at a team like the Denver Nuggets and, you know, not knowing if Jamal Murray is going to be the number 2 guy going forward. I don't know if he's good enough. I don't know if he ever will be good enough to be a number 2 going forward, especially on a team you want to win a championship on. Like, that's just my thing. I know Jamal Murray got a fat contract extension this offseason or not this offseason, this I think it was past offseason. One could say his contract extension was off the dome. I don't know. I just don't think, to be totally honest, the Denver Nuggets are a team that is ready to win. And that is like a total hot shot right there. I just don't think they are. I don't think Paul Millsap's ever going to win a championship, as much as it sucks. Hopefully Michael Porter Jr. can, you know, overcome all his injuries and turn into a franchise star. That would be absolutely huge, 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 huge for the Denver Nuggets if he could do that. Because then you have Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, Michael Porter Jr., potentially Gary Harris, and I don't even know who you'd put in there at, you know, power forward, but whatever it may be, that is a championship team if Michael Porter Jr., you know, can end up getting healthy and turn into a franchise star that many thought he was going to be before he got drafted. And then we take a look at the Houston Rockets here. It is going to be James Harden for me. You know, I went back and forth between him and Russell Westbrook, but I think ultimately if James Harden doesn't play well, the team's not doing anything. James Harden currently putting up 34.4 points per game, 6.5 boards, 7.5 assists. I mean, there's not much you can say about him. I believe he's leading the league in points per game. He just needs to facilitate the basketball. He needs to score a lot. He needs to hit a lot of threes. And I don't know who on the Denver Nuggets is going to be covering James Harden. Like, you put Jamal Murray probably on Russell Westbrook, if he can even cover him. Who in the hell is covering James Harden? I don't think there's really an answer for him there. I think James Harden absolutely feasts in this series. However, though, I think it does go to 7 series. I think the experience card, you know, does, you know, pull an upset on this one, and I do give it to the Rockets in 7. Finishing out the series in Denver, which is going to be interesting. If the Rockets go to Denver and end up winning in 7. That is my prediction, though. Like it or hate it, that's what it's going to be. Now we take a look at my final matchup here, which honestly was my toughest one. The 4-seed Utah Jazz going up against the Oklahoma City Thunder as a 5-seed. This Oklahoma City Thunder team came out of nowhere whatever the percentage was, I think it was like under some percentage, it was like 3% or something for them to make the playoffs at the start of the 2019-2020 season, have turned into a team that has pretty much surprised everyone. You know, when Chris Paul got traded over to Oklahoma City for Russell Westbrook, I think everybody thought Oklahoma City was either going to let Chris Paul play a year and then trade him if that's possible, maybe buy him out. I don't think anybody really thought Chris Paul was, you know, going to turn into a guy for the Oklahoma City Thunder that brought them great leadership experience, great locker room experience, and ultimately just one of the best ball facilitators still in the NBA today. You know, Chris Paul currently sitting at 17.5 points, 5 rebounds, 6.5, almost 7 assists, 6.8 to be exact. I mean, still one of the better point guards in the league. Numbers-wise, doesn't really show it, but he's a lot more than numbers. Still a really solid defensive point guard and a guy that has a ton of playoff experience. Not a ton of good playoff experience with the Los Angeles Clippers. You know, the team that could never get out of the second round when they had Lob City there in LA. But I think Chris Paul, you know, I think he plays like a stud. I think him and SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I cannot pronounce that dude's name for the life of me, you know, end up kind of teaming up here. You look at a guy like Danilo Gallinari, a guy like Steven Adams, two guys else, a lot of veteran leadership and a lot of experience. I think that team ends up winning against the Utah Jazz in 7 games. It's crazy to say I think it's going to happen. I don't think the Jazz are in a position right now that's going to let them win a playoff series. I think Donovan Mitchell just doesn't have enough experience. I think all this stuff with Rudy Gobert is going to affect him, all the coronavirus stuff. I just don't think the chemistry is there right now for the Utah Jazz to, you know, really get anything done. That's basically my prediction for those 8 first-round matchups in the Eastern and Western Conference. On this point, I'm going to go into the biggest surprise of each conference playoff matchup so far. In the East, it's going to be the Heat winning in 6, but Domantas Sabonis proves to Indiana that he's a franchise player. I mean, my guess, he averages probably close to 20 points a game, 12.5 boards, and 6 assists. He's one of the most underrated passing big men in today's NBA, in my opinion. I mean, he's a great ball facilitator. I don't know if it's quite the level of like a Nikola Jokic. I mean, maybe at one point an Al Horford, but I think Domantas Sabonis is a franchise player. I think he really is. Obviously, they thought Victor Oladipo was at one point in time when they made that trade with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and it's crazy to think that they got both of them from the Oklahoma City Thunder for Paul George. Paul George is no longer even in Oklahoma City, and now the Indiana Pacers are sitting pretty with Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. So, I mean, everybody looked at that trade originally thinking, like, what in the world in the hell is Indiana doing? And, you know, I don't know the name off the top of my head of the Indiana's GM, but whoever that is, he's doing really, really well. So I think that's my prediction. I think Domantas Sabonis turns into a franchise player, and not even turns into one, proves to Indiana that he is a franchise player, a guy you can build your franchise around. He's also on a really good contract right now. He's in the final year of his original contract extension. He signed a contract extension, I believe it was past offseason one before. It caps at $20.7 million in the 2023-2024 NBA season, which is just absolutely crazy for a guy that puts up, like, what is it right now? I have his stats on the screen. I can tell you. The guy that puts up 18.5 points, 12.5 boards, and 5 assists a game. $20 million in today's NBA. Like, Nicholas Batum's making like $27 million right now. That's absolutely crazy that you have Domantas Sabonis on a steal of a contract that not only caps at $20.7 million, is less than that for the other 3 years of the contract extension. I mean, that's just nuts. That's nuts to me. It's an absolute steal of a contract. I think if they can go out and potentially get another star, whether that be via trade, it's not a great free agency. Go out and get that star. I think Miles Turner is a very expendable player for your team. Sabonis is kind of proved he can play both the center and the power forward spot. I like him a little more at power forward. That's just my opinion, though. Victor Oladipo, Domantas Sabonis, and whatever third star you trade for. That is a crazy big 3. That is probably a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, in my opinion. Now we move on to the Western Conference here. The biggest surprise, something still off with Denver. You know, I kind of went in on them a little bit. I love the Denver Nuggets. They're one of my top favorite teams in the league. I'm a Celtics fan, if you guys did not know, if you're listening to me the first time here on Behind the Basket. I'm a huge Celtics fan, die hard till the day I die. If I had to pick 2 other teams that I like, it's the Denver Nuggets and the Phoenix Suns. They're my other 2 teams. I don't, necessarily go out and root for them, but if there's a random game on at some night, there's a playoff matchup on that has no implications on my Celtics, which both those teams are in the West, so typically they never do. The Denver Nuggets, the Phoenix Suns are my 2 other teams. I would say probably Phoenix is a little bit ahead of Denver, but I love the Denver Nuggets, and I love what they've been doing. Something is still off with that team. I just don't think they currently have enough leadership. I mean, you look at a veteran like Paul Millsap, I don't know if he's enough to, get it done. I'm sure he's a great person. I'm sure he's a good locker room presence. I just don't know if he's enough of a leader, to really get this team over the hump. And it's probably going to be his final year in Denver anyway, which is, sad to say. I have no clue where the hell Paul Millsap could end up next year. I don't think Denver should re-sign him. And then my other point here for Denver is kind of what I was touching on a little bit before. Is Jamal Murray a good enough number 2 next to Nikola Jokic on a championship team? My opinion, right now, he's not. He's not even close. I think maybe another 3 or 4 years, who knows, he can develop into something. The tough thing is, if he doesn't develop into anything more, you're paying a guy like however much money. It's like a max contract extension that's like the next 4 or 5 years, and you have no other money to go out and get another star. So he would have to be in trade rumors. It's going to be a tough trade to probably make if you're going to eventually look for one. I don't know if they would look for one. I think he is, as now, a solid number 2. I just don't think. I mean, you build teams in the NBA and you pay guys contract extensions because you think they're good enough to help you win a championship. That's why you do it. You don't pay them because there's loyalty or anything like that. You take a look at what the Celtics did with like a guy like Isaiah Thomas. They full on never believed that Isaiah Thomas was going to be the guy to lead them to a championship. They traded him to Cleveland, got back Kyrie Irving. Obviously, that never worked out. But they wholeheartedly believed that Kyrie Irving was enough to win them a championship. Whether there was locker room problems there, whatever the case may be, that didn't work. I don't want something similar to happen like this. What happened to Cleveland, or excuse me, what happened to the Celtics with Isaiah Thomas and Kyrie Irving, to happen to the Denver Nuggets. Now, obviously, it won't be a contract thing. It'll be more of just, is the guy good enough? They already gave him the contract. There's not much you can do about that one. But I think it might be time for Denver to go out and make a blockbuster trade this offseason, whether that involves Michael Porter Jr. and Gary Harris. Guys like that, maybe throw Bol Bol in the trade just to, make somebody happy and get a couple fans watching your games. But whatever it may be, I don't really know off the top of my head who are some stars that would be available. Like, I'm talking like serious number 2 option, like a Chris Middleton, like a Kyle Lowry. Not saying those guys exactly, but like those the guys' status. Like behind a superstar, for a fact they can get out there and compete and probably win you a championship. So those are my biggest surprise from each conference from the 2019-2020 NBA playoffs. We take a look at the next round matchups, which I will be going in Behind the Basket episode number 2, hopefully coming out sometime next week. It's going to be the 1-seeded Milwaukee Bucks going up against the 4-seeded Miami Heat. You take a look at the 2-seeded Toronto Raptors and the 3-seeded Boston Celtics. So 2 really enticing matchups in the Eastern Conference. Giannis Antetokounmpo against Jimmy Butler. Pascal Siakam against Jason Tatum. I am pumped to watch, or not hopefully watch them someday. Pumped to talk about them, go into a little bit more detail. Take a look at the West. We have the 1-seeded Los Angeles Lakers going up against the 5-seeded Oklahoma City Thunder, and the 2-seeded LA Clippers going up against the 6-seeded Houston Rockets. So those will be the 4 matchups I will talk about in some significant detail, in the next video. Along with that, I am going to do that one for my next video. If you guys have any other, topics that you want me to cover on the podcast, I would obviously be happy to do that. Feel free to let me know that down below in the comment section if you guys are watching on YouTube. I don't really think there's a place on Spotify that you can, comment. I could be wrong on that. If there is, feel free to comment there. If not, feel free to shoot me a DM. My Twitter handle is @Massa_YT. My DMs are always open. You can tweet at me if you can't find it for some reason. But yeah, they're always open. So now we're going to hop into the final segment here of the Behind the Basket podcast. Some questions. Question number 1 here is coming from Michael Y. This question was off of YouTube. 3 of these are off YouTube. 1 of them is off Twitter. What team is a good fit for Andre Drummond if he opts out this offseason? Obviously, Andre Drummond got traded at the deadline over to the Cleveland Cavaliers, a trade which I did not understand in the slightest, like literally not at all. Could not tell you what in the hell. Like, I get it, the Detroit Pistons are trying to rebuild, but they didn't get anything back worth any value. So, like, that's... If you're going to trade a franchise, not even a franchise guy, but a guy you've been building your franchise around in Andre Drummond, you should at least probably get like a really young player and a really good pick. Andre Drummond's a really good center in today's NBA. Is he overpaid? Probably. Maybe a little bit, but what are you going to do? I mean, I don't love the fact that the Detroit Pistons are going out. Like, off the top of my head, what was the exact trade? I'm going to look it up right now because I don't remember the exact trade. Andre Drummond. I will tell you what it is. I really should have written it down, but I straight up just don't remember you. Jesus Christ, remember it. Yeah, the Detroit Pistons have built towards the future by trading Andre Drummond to the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Pistons will acquire Brandon Knight, John Henson, and a 2023 first-round pick. I mean, I understand why Cleveland did it, and who the hell wants Brandon Knight and John Henson on their team? But why the hell is Detroit doing that? I mean, that's just, it's dumb. It's dumb. It makes no sense, in my opinion. I mean, you aren't getting anything of value. 2 veteran players on a team that's also rebuilding and a second-round pick. I don't know. I don't know. Back to the question. Enough of me ranting here. So what teams are maybe a good fit for Andre Drummond? You know, I had 2 that come to the top of my head. Andre Drummond could potentially be a really solid fit in the Dallas Mavericks and the New Orleans Pelicans. You know, we take a look at the Mavericks team. Obviously, one franchise star and another really good player, and Kristaps Porzingis around Luka Doncic. I think he can kind of complete their big 3, really help the Dallas Mavericks compete in the Western Conference next year. That is if the Mavericks have enough cap space, if they're able to clear enough up. And then we take a look at the New Orleans Pelicans, who they did draft Jackson Hayes. I don't know if he's going to be good enough to be a franchise center, but Andre Drummond's still really young, I believe 26, 27 years old. He can go out and play with guys in 3 to 4 years, only be 30 years old, like Lonzo Ball, like Brandon Ingram, like Zion Williamson. I mean, you don't have really good front court spacing, but like Zion and Andre Drummond as a front court is still absolutely insane. And Zion has gotten better as a shooter. Brandon Ingram, and then if I doubt you're going to have JJ Redick again, but if you have a guy who can shoot the ball really well at shooting guard, that's a really good starting lineup. I believe the Pelicans should have enough cap space to, you know, pull that one off this offseason. So those are my 2 predictions for what team Andre Drummond will go to if he does opt out. We take a look here at question number 2 here. This one comes from Asayas Makona. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. This one came on YouTube in my most recent video before this. If you guys want to ask questions also for the next podcast, as I mentioned, in the comment section of this video or on Twitter, DM, tweet at me, whatever the hell the case may be. Will Aaron Gordon be traded this offseason? Now, I'm going to put it simply, in my opinion, probably not. I don't think that the Orlando Magic want to trade him. I don't think they have any desire to trade him. I think if they're going to trade somebody, it's probably going to be Jonathan Isaac. That is my guess. I don't think Jonathan Isaac and Aaron Gordon are working out playing together. I just don't think they are. I think Aaron Gordon's value is a little bit higher than Jonathan Isaac. I mean, Jonathan Isaac has turned out, and not even broken out, but has turned into one of the better defensive players, not defensive players in the NBA, but like kind of like a guy that came out of nowhere to turn into a really good defensive player, if you know what I'm saying. So that's why I think they're probably not going to trade Aaron Gordon, because he's kind of like your not even number 1 behind Vucevic, but like number 2 option probably. I don't know. I tossed in some trades, just in case it's a possibility. First one here is going to be with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think it's going to be Jarrett Culver, a first-round pick and a cap filler to get it done. I mean, Jarrett Culver, former number 6 or 7 overall pick, I believe. A first-round pick, and then just cap filler. Doesn't have to be anybody amazing, but I think you're going to have to give up some really solid value for Aaron Gordon if you want him. I think he's a really good player. Really underrated player, in my opinion. He's not on a bad contract in the slightest. And then my second one is when the Denver Nuggets. It's going to be Gary Harris in a first-round pick. If I were the Denver Nuggets, I don't want to give up Gary Harris. I really don't. I think he's, built his whole career in Denver. Really played, not even like a star, but like a really good role player, if you know what I'm saying. And I get it. Aaron Gordon's probably not a star. I would say it's weird. He's like above a role player, but he's below a star. I don't think he's quite at that star level yet. I'm not saying he couldn't get there. I think he's only 24, 25 years old. He definitely still has the potential to. I just think the value is still going to be high. So Gary Harris in a first-round pick, that would be my answer. But again, I don't think he's going to be traded this offseason. And finally, in the final, little topic here, we're going to go over, some personal questions here. People are just interested in these. And to be honest, why the hell wouldn't you be? I'm kidding. Got to toot my own horn a little bit. So question number 1 here comes from my most previous YouTube video, Gary Devaney. Thank you so much for the question, Gary. It was, when did you decide to do YouTube is what you want to do, and what is some advice you would have for people trying to start? So a little bit of a two-parter here. I can kind of give you guys my background. So originally I started doing YouTube, I believe it was my junior year of high school. I'm currently a sophomore in college right now. So junior year of high school was around, I think it was around my winter break or something. I remember a couple of my friends ended up starting it, and I was like, oh, this seems interesting. Well, I'll watch their videos. And I actually featured, at first, originally, a lot of you, actually pretty much all of you probably didn't know this. I actually used to have a channel with 2 or 3 of my, I can't remember exactly, 2 or 3 of my other friends, and we would upload like Grand Theft Auto, and it was weird as hell. It was so weird, and I was like, what in the world am I doing? I remember the night, one of our videos got to 80 views, and it got to 80 views because we just kept refreshing the page and it gave us views. And then we woke up the next morning and had 7 views, and I was like, oh my God. So that's kind of my start to YouTube. Eventually, we stopped uploading videos on that channel. One of my other friends who I don't believe does YouTube anymore, but started his own channel. He uploaded like Call of Duty. I forget what other games he uploaded. I think a little bit of Grand Theft Auto, but it didn't end up working with him. He got to like 300 subscribers, I think, which is like, it's very hard to get your first 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That has been the hardest part of YouTube before me. Besides getting hacked, getting my first 1,000 subscribers, the accomplishment, I felt so accomplished getting my first 1,000 subscribers. Like, literally, I thought I hit 100K. Like, 1,000 subscribers to me was absolutely huge. I mean, absolutely with a bullet, one of the biggest things. Like, just one of like the most prideful moments for me when I was like, 1,000 people actually think I create good enough content for them to, you know, subscribe to me. So like that was really cool. He ended up quitting. It was actually funny because when I started out really slow. My first series was I did a Celtics My GM, I believe. That was my first full series. And that ended up going pretty well. I had a bunch of people actually ended up like loving that series and like really, really paying attention to it and really watching pretty much every episode. Sorry, I'm just taking a sip of water here. But eventually, I didn't really want to do that. I eventually moved towards into My League. I really started watching My League YouTubers around my junior year of high school. I actually watched some sophomore year. I just didn't really know how to do it, and I didn't really think it was, you know, for me. I had never been good at actually like playing in game 2K, like My League, my career. I was never really good at that. I played a little bit of my career. I don't really do that anymore. But I started out watching. My first guy I ever watched was CSB. I don't know if you guys remember him. I'm sure a lot of you do if you are watching this video, but. Yeah, he was like the OG My League rebuilder. He made some really good videos. I used to look forward to them pretty much whenever they came out. And then I started watching Six Rings of Steel, who's one of my pretty good YouTube friends today. I collab with him a decent amount. He's got a ton more subscribers than me, but I give that kid credit. That kid grinds harder than anybody I've ever seen in this world. I mean, his videos have come a long, long way from just basically sitting down, you know, doing a rebuild and just not doing anything to him. Now he makes a ton of edits. They're really, really solid. He has a podcast as well. It's called Just Ball. Make sure you go check that out after this. But yeah, he's a good friend of mine in the YouTube community. I don't really know him personally, but if we're talking about like friends, I guess I'm putting quotation marks up in the YouTube community. He's probably one of my better ones. So back to my story. Sorry, I do tend to ramble a little bit when I'm talking about myself, which is a terrible quality, but it happens. It's my podcast, so I'll do what I want. So I decided that YouTube is what I wanted to do. I think eventually, once I hit 1,000 subscribers, I think that was kind of like one of the cooler things for me. I was like, okay, maybe I can go somewhere for this. And then I hit 5,000. And eventually I hit 10,000, which is really cool. Seeing 5 digits on my screen. And then like 15, 20, 25, like stuff like that, which is really, really cool. I just kind of kept grinding, stuck with it. And honestly, like, I didn't enjoy, you know, the grind. Like, it's never fun, the grind, but you embrace it. It's something, you know, you sit down every day, you don't know how a video is going to do, and I just kind of, you know, sat there, sucked it up majorly. Like, when I'm telling you, there are going to be some days when you are so down and you want to quit so badly, and you're like, what in the hell am I doing? Like, I just spent an hour and a half to 2 hours, you know, making this video to upload it to YouTube for it to get 23 views. What am I doing? It's the process. It's the grind. I promise you, it sucks. It sucks for everybody. Nobody just started a YouTube channel and instantly had 100,000 subscribers. It just doesn't happen. It's just not how it works. Everybody starts out at the same number. But the fans figure out who's going to eventually get to that 100K. So that would be, you know, probably like that's when I originally wanted to, when I realized that, you know, maybe I'm doing something here, kind of building a brand, building a channel that people actually, you know, do enjoy. And then some advice that I would have for people to start. I actually get this question on Twitter quite a bit as well. I just picked this one out because, you know, I saw it first on YouTube and I only asked for questions under that video. My biggest advice would be never, you know, make a video that you don't enjoy making, or never cover a topic that you don't enjoy making. I remember I used to have people all the time, and I still do to this day, asking me to play my career, play my team. I don't enjoy it. I'm never going to do it. I'm like most like 95% chance I never end up doing that. I don't think it's fun. I know my career and my team YouTubers get a lot more views, a lot more subscribers. I would never do YouTube if it wasn't something I didn't enjoy doing. If I didn't sit down every day, you know, enjoy making videos, this would not be something I was doing. I mean, it's cliche, and I'm sure a lot of YouTubers say this, but I'm not in this for the money at all. When my channel got hacked, the only thing I wanted back was my channel and the ability to upload videos. I lost 3 months pay, and that was not something I really cared about at all. It just straight up wasn't. I mean, I do this because I enjoy producing quality content that you guys also enjoy watching in turn. Now, is it nice to get paid? Yeah, it's obviously nice. I'm never going to be like, oh no, I don't care about the money at all. Like, yeah, it's awesome. It's really cool to have, but I think even if I, didn't get paid as much as I'm not saying I get paid a ton, I really don't at all, but like even if I didn't necessarily get a paycheck, I would still do this. I think I honestly would. I seriously enjoy sitting down, making quality content and doing rebuilds for you guys. Like that is my favorite thing to do. Hopefully eventually doing this podcast, that would be crazy. So my biggest thing on advice would be do videos that you enjoy doing. Now I'm not saying don't ever like listen to like comments and don't do stuff that they, want you to do and that they're like guaranteeing that they'll watch, because that's the biggest thing when you're first starting. Like you got to do what makes the people happy. But like if you're seriously not enjoying something, don't do it. It's not worth it. You're going to drive yourself crazy. It's going to drive you to quit. Oh my God, we're at 45 minutes. I didn't even realize here. Absolutely nuts. My mouth keeps drying out. I keep needing to take sips of water. I'm sorry. This is why I need a second person on, so when they're talking, I can start talking. And eventually we will have some guests on. Don't you worry. And then the final question here comes from Sean Wilson. He sent me a Twitter DM. Thank you, Sean, for the question. Favorite video you have ever made? Now, I had to think about this one, honestly, for a while. And I don't really know. I cannot actually give you a specific answer here for what my favorite video of all time is. I mean, I'm just taking a look right now at like what are my most popular videos. I think my most popular video is still my first rebuild on 2K17. Yeah, it's my Philadelphia 76ers My League rebuild on 2K17. I loved making that video. I had a ton of fun making that one. To be honest, if you guys want to go back and watch it, it was my fantasy draft rebuild in 2K19. I don't know why it did so well. It's Kawhi and Luka Doncic on the thumbnail. I just remember having a ton of fun sitting down and making that one. It was not a high point in my life. I'm not going to get into detail on that, but it was not a high point in my life for me. And that video just hit, and it had 35,000 views somehow. And it was honestly, I enjoyed making it so much. And honestly, I enjoyed making all my OG videos a ton as well. Like when I used to make my thumbnails myself, my guy Crushables makes my thumbnails now. Huge shout out to him. Make sure to go check him out on YouTube as well. Really solid thumbnail guy. But when I used to make my own thumbnails, like I don't know why, I just felt like I worked harder in the video, if you know what I mean. Like it's weird to say, but like I feel like I did more. But it's still obviously a grind. I think every single video that I do, typically also the most fun ones are the ones that happen like sporadically. Like when you sit down like immediately and just have to make, like when breaking news comes, that's when I love making videos, because I think it's ultimately like so fun, because I'm trying to be the first one to get something out. Typically it never happens. I'm never really the first one. I actually did have the reason that my Philadelphia 76ers rebuild on 2K17 has 53,000 views right now, which is my most ever, is because I was the first one to put it out. I literally remember sitting, as soon as midnight hit, I loaded into My League, grinded out a 26-minute video somehow, and uploaded it at like 2 a.m. And when I uploaded it, it didn't even get a ton of views. I woke up, and the video had like 3,000 views. Like I woke up for school. It was like a school night in high school still. And I woke up, and the video literally probably had like 3,000 views, which was a ton for me at the time. But 50,000 views later, I was like, what in the hell? And so that just kind of surprisingly came out of nowhere. That one made me really happy to do. So that would kind of be, probably one of my more favorite videos, of all time making. So that pretty much wraps up here Behind the Basket episode 1. I felt this podcast went really well. Obviously, we had a couple of hiccups. I have to figure out how the hell I'm supposed to drink water during this. That's going to be tough because I'm not going to cut it. It's a podcast. It's not a video. So that'll be something we have to figure out. I did tell you guys in one of my other YouTube videos, I do have a guest coming on. I'm not going to tell you who it's going to be. It's going to be a surprise. I will announce it the day before after we're done recording the episode. A couple of you guys have actually guessed it in a couple comment sections of my video. So leave some comments down below in the YouTube video, as I said before, on what future podcast topics you want me to cover. If you guys enjoyed, me going into doing some questions after, whether it have been the NBA questions, whether it be like about my personal life, that's great. I'd be happy to do those pretty much every video. I think it's a great way to, kind of wrap it up and get you guys involved in the videos as well. Because when I announced that I was doing Behind the Basket, I kind of emphasized the point on I want to get you guys involved. Obviously there's not a ton you guys can do when it's like it's my channel, it's my podcast, it's my mic and stuff like that. Like you can't really talk on it, but I try to get you guys involved as much as possible. So that's kind of where I see I'm going with this podcast. The next couple of videos, their topics are already booked, but I want you guys to decide what I talk about. I mean, I can always pick stuff out myself. I think it's more interesting if you guys listen to what you want to hear, though. So like that's kind of my biggest thing. I cannot thank you guys all enough. This video, I know for a fact, is not going to do as well as my rebuild videos. That's just kind of how it goes. You guys subscribe to me to watch rebuilds. You don't subscribe to me to, sit here and listen to me for 50 minutes rambling. So that's kind of the goal, to eventually move this strictly only to Spotify and Apple Music. Probably for at least the first 10 to 15 episodes, that will all be on YouTube as well. I have no idea what you're watching in the background right now. My camera's not on. It's strictly my microphone. So something's in the background, whether it's a picture, something like that, I apologize. So I cannot thank you guys enough for all the support. I've gotten tons of Twitter DMs, tons of YouTube comments saying I am looking forward to this. I'm super pumped about it. So if you guys enjoyed, please share with people you know. Please listen to it wherever you want. I'm really excited for this going forward. You guys will probably see a rebuild tomorrow as well. So I cannot thank you guys enough for listening. This has been Behind the Basket episode 1. I'll see you guys all in the next one.